We've used services a lot. The PDOK services plugin is an example of a very simple solution to the services, to get services in your map. Those services are relatively new, relatively as in 10 years ago, I couldn't teach you this way because it would just not perform, that wouldn't work. But nowadays we work a lot in services. That means that you don't have to make a copy of all the data. There's so much available and everyone is sharing the data. One great thing about geoinformation today is that there is a lot of institutions who make data for their own work and then they share it with the rest of the world. So most of the data you use is, it's made by an organization that needs it for the purpose of that organization and then shares the data with you. So that means it's not perfect for your needs, it's perfect for their needs. But as they do it in a service, it's excellent that you can just log on to that service and query it and everything. So what we did was that there are two main types of services, WMS and WFS. And there's pros and cons to both. And you've been using both, or at least most of you have been using both. And we had some questions about, okay, how can I, for example, how can I vectorize a WMS? Or how can I make a nice map of a WFS without it being so slow? So let's have a look at this. If you look at the WMS, the web mapping service, I say the service provider is king. The service provider is the one that makes the way the map works, but also the way the map looks. So it's a ready-made map. So all the colors, all the styling, everything is done. It's done by the provider, the service provider, who is most of the time also the owner of the data and the organization that sometimes makes the data as well. So for yourself, there's hardly anything you can change about that. I will show you a bit. You can, for example, if you use you can make it gray, black and white or whatever, but otherwise you cannot change the data styling itself because it's done by the service provider. One disadvantage, I would say, is that there's the possibility that it has a skill threshold. That means, for example, the BGT, the base registration for the large-scale mapping in the Netherlands, basisregistratie, grootschalige topografie. That one has a skill threshold of 1 in 5,000. So if you're zoomed out a bit, and normally you're zoomed out a bit in a GIS, it just doesn't show. Only if you zoom in more than to 1 in 5,000, it will actually give you the data. It is the service provider that decides how you could have a look at this map. I'm not very positive about that. I see the why it is happening, but well. One of the other things is the legend for a WMS service. In the standard for the service, a legend image is optional. So sometimes there's no legend, sometimes there's an image as a legend. And that image, you cannot change the image. And as I say here, most of the time it's ugly as hell. So what to do about that? If you really want to make a nice final map with using this WMS and make it, you have to make your own legend. And that means kind of tinkering a bit with something like Illustrator or Photoshop, making your own legend item and popping that into the map. The WMS standard also has a tiled map standard. It's WMTS. So that is a tiled map. That means that in fixed scales, you get fixed images. So it's got not, if you look at scales as a pyramid, where you zoom in and out, it is a, it's the stairs again. There's different levels and on every level there's a specific image for you. That gives issues with printing and exporting because it is all done for screen, so 72 dots per inch, and printing or exporting the data to something that you need for print is on 300 dots per inch most of the time. So that means that from 72 to 300, so that's 4 times as much, but it's 2 ways. So you need 16 times as much data for a print than for a screen. So if you start printing or exporting data on print level for print, that could give you some issues because you're asking 16 times as much data as at the moment that you're watching it on your screen. But most of the time, WMTS is used for a very fast background map. And in that case, it's fine. But it has some issues. And we've seen that you've encountered some of those. If you go to a WMS service, you go through the data source manager and you connect to a service manually, you see that there's more layers. And you can combine layers or you can load them separately. And if you combine the layers in a WMS service, that means that it will give you one image back with these layers combined. That is something you can do. And if you want to change how a layer looks, for example, you want to gray one out but not the other one, you could separate them. It's kind of a neat trick. I'll show you later. So far, any questions, Stefan? Did something come up that I need to know?
No, not at the moment.
Okay.
Any questions at the moment regarding this? Because there were a lot of questions about the topo-titrace connection, but also a lot of questions about the PDoc linking. I just started up QGIS, and indeed, if you use the PDoc service directly from the PDoc menu, then there's an error. But if you copy the link, it will work. So
sometimes it happens, yeah. So we've got WFS, web feature. So while the WMS, the mapping service, is a ready-made map, feature service gives you data. So it is just as if you downloaded data on your computer or you've got your own shapefiles or whatever. You can handle it as vector data. So no styling here in this case doesn't mean you cannot style. No, you have to make your own styling because it will come without any styling. Here, there's no scale cap, but there's a max feature cap. So a service provider can say, don't download more than 1,000 or 10,000 features in one go. That used to be a really big problem because it meant that if you go on if you look at for example, one municipality, and you can only download 1,000 or 5,000 houses, you'll always, it's totally useless because only if you have a small village you can see all the different features, all the different houses. So but nowadays there's a thing called paging, and paging means that if it says a maximum of 1,000, that means that you send a request for 1,000 objects, and then another request for another 1,000, and another request for another 1,000, and it does so automatically under the hood. You don't have to look into that, and that helps a lot because the reason why this cap on the max download features is that as long as the server is working on your request, no one else can get through. So if you zoom out to the whole of the Netherlands and you say, I want to add this service with all the houses, that means that you get about 10, 11 million houses downloaded to your computer. And as long as it's working on that, and sometimes if you have a slow connection or if the other side has a slow connection, that could take a lot of time and it will just block all traffic to that server at that time. So what they do is they page that into smaller requests. So you get the first 1,000, the second 1,000, and in between those requests, someone else can put another request in. So you can share the load of the server there a bit. So that is why this happens. Another thing is that some of you said that it is extremely slow working with these services, and that is true, especially if you have a large number of features in your view, because every time that you move, it will start a new request. So as soon as you pan your screen or you zoom in a bit or zoom out, it will send a new request to the server. Okay, give me the new features here. So that is really sluggish, and that is where you can decide to download or not to download the data. And sometimes you download it just because you say, okay, this is taking too long. Sometimes it is, I need this data in this project, and I'm going to use it like every day, even if it's not that big, but I'm going to use it every day for the next weeks. Maybe it's good to have it on my own machine so that I'm not dependent on connection speed, etc. So there are some good reasons to download. There's also some good reasons not to download. For example, if you look at the building data set that we use, the Bach, it is updated daily. Not the one that we do at the university, by the way, but if you look at the official one, it is updated daily, more or less, and the response time, if you find something that is incorrect in the data and you make a request to the municipality saying, okay, I see something wrong in this data and can you change that? They have a response time of maximum 4 days. So that means that if they change something, it will be, well, within a week, it will be back in the service again. So if you want to have the actual situation in a certain point of time and you want to find that, it is very wise not to download the data, because as soon as you downloaded it, it's frozen in time at a certain point.